Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tammy Ernest and I am a longarm quilter, and here on my channel I like to share customer finishes as well as my own personal projects. If you're new here, I'm so glad you've joined us. If you're returning, thanks for joining me again today. I am so happy to have returning visitors every week. It's like we just get to sit down and chat. I hope you're sewing and enjoying quilting while you're watching along today. So today I am going to do kind of a history of my journey in quilting. Just a short, I'm going to do this a little bit each episode, I guess you want to call it an episode. I had some comments asking, could you show us some of your early quilts? And I am so, I want to encourage you in your journey, no matter where you're starting out. So today you're going to see some of my very early work. I began quilting when I was pregnant with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I began quilting when I was pregnant with my 5th child. My mom was the one that introduced me to quilting. I had done some sewing before that, basically just for my own house. I had done I made a blanket for I want to call it a blanket for our oldest son. It was really just fabric with some strips of quilt, or just some straight line stitches, not even very close together, just to keep it together. I didn't know any quilting. All it was doing was just creating a blanket for his bed. And I did some sewing of some draperies, I guess you want to say, not anything fancy. I had done a little bit of garment sewing. I had learned to sew in high school, but it was my mom that introduced me to quilting when I'm going to introduce you to my very first quilt that I did, and then I'm going to show you how when I actually got into quilting. And somebody in the comments had asked if I would show some of my early things, because I think your journey is important. I think embrace your early work. It's where you get clarity. It's kind of where you learn your skills. You're making usable things, and they'll be loved whether all your points match or whether it's a perfect pattern or not. It's all part of the journey. So I'm going to show you a little bit each week of some of my early things, and I hope you enjoy it. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to move on to, I want to show you a little trick with longarm. Some of you have long arms and you may be doing digital pantographs. I just want to show you a little trick that's a question sometimes about how to align pantographs, and then we'll get into customer quilts. So let's start off with my quilting journey. So this first quilt here, this was actually my if you want to count, my very first quilt. I don't know if it's really quilting. I mean, I guess it is. I had done cross stitch, so you'll even see part of my cross stitch journey. These are all cross stitched little blocks, all of them little farm animals, and all this is set with fabric and tied in the corners. That was my very first quilt. My mom helped me to do this. We did a kind of a ruffled edge around the outside. This matched my bedroom in high school, and just kind of my early start. I didn't know anything about quilting. I'd made all of these little animal cross stitch, and my mom helped me put it together into a quilt. So my very first quilt, this actually hung on my wall. If you saw my video probably about a year ago when I did a tour of my smaller sewing studio, this hung on the wall, and it's always just been one of those mementos that I've kept either in the cedar chest or up to as a display. So it's not been, very little wear to it. I'm not even sure that's even been washed, to be honest, and that may be a terrible thing to say, but just by the feel of it, I'm not sure that it ever has. It's always been up for display. So that's how I started very early on. Then I actually didn't get into quilting, like I said, until I was pregnant with my 5th son, and my mom invited me along to a quilt. I don't know if it was a bed turning or just a presentation. It was, I'm pretty sure it was Alex Anderson. And it was like a brunch type thing, and that's the first time I had seen quilting. And then shortly after that we went to another one that was Mary Ellen Hopkins. Is that her name? And don't be afraid to sit on my quilt or something like that. Those were early on, and that was really my introduction to quilting. So just over 20 years ago. And so I wanted to show you my you know, this would have been my very earliest quilt, but the next quilt that I made was this 4-patch. Now, I have said before, my quilts are used you know, unless it's like that one that's the cross-stitch one where it's up for display. I let my kids use my quilts. They're taken outside and put on the grass. We do picnics. We take them in the car. I mean, I want them to be used. There are a few pieces that I've kept as more sentimental or where they were a lot of work and I don't feel like they're usable quilts. Probably my Lori Holt ones that I've made, those have got a lot of applique, a lot of embellishments on it. To me, those aren't really everyday quilts, but just about everything else I have, I want the kids to use, want the family to use. So this one is very well loved, and when I made this one, I literally remember crawling along the floor, laying it out on the floor, because I was every bit of 8+ months pregnant with our fifth child, which was a son. And so very basic. This was just a 4-patch. I'm thinking I even bought it as a kit, or it was given to me by my mom as a kit. The larger squares were like a chenille. You can see how well it's been used. I mean, the chenille has just been rubbed completely off. It's almost bare. And then the other flannels or homespuns, and some were flannels, some were homespuns, and it was just a 4-patch and joined together. You can see how worn it is. There was batting in here, but even the batting's getting worn away. But I'm okay with that. To me, this is part of the journey. I don't want all my quilts just to be stuck up on a shelf and never used. I want them to be loved. Just a very simple backing, and then you can see all I did was stitch in the ditch on this one. I did not have a long arm. Was just finishing a quilt on my own, and so it's just stitch in the ditch. And that was my very first quilt. Very simple, very easy to put together, but boy did it start my journey off quickly. So from there, I used the scraps left over from this quilt then to make this wall hanging. And again, I can remember having a table set up in like our mud room, what's today is our mud room, and I can remember it was during pumpkin patch season, and again, I was probably pregnant or had a little baby in the house, because during that time, we had 5 children born in 5 years, literally. And so I remember being inside where everybody was outside during pumpkin patch time, and I can remember sitting at a table and piecing this one together, little tiny pieces. It's all scraps. You can see a lot of the same, or what that one should have looked like. These were the original fabrics. Again, this is hung on a wall all of these years, so it's still in really good condition. So it's the flannels. You can see my setting triangles were what the backing was from that other quilt. This pattern, I believe, was from the book Little Quilts, and I probably still have the book. And I loved this. It was using all those little scraps, so it's set on point. You can see, and it's these are tiny little squares. Well, this is a 9-patch in the middle, right here, and then on the edge, it's little squares on the corners with a rectangle on either side. So tiny, tiny little pieces, but I was right then is where I was using up scraps that I had. I had a red flannel on the back, and again, I just stitched in the ditch. I don't know if you can tell on the back. That's how I finished my stuff back then, and just love it. Early stuff. From then, I remember quilting, making quilts for my girls. So if you remember, I have 7 children. We had, our oldest son had his own room, and then we had the 3 girls in one bedroom and the younger 3 boys in another bedroom. And so, again, I remember, when you have lots of children, I date things by when I was pregnant with somebody or when I was nursing somebody. That's how I remember things. And so I remember buying the fabrics for these quilts. There were 3 of them. Our oldest daughter has moved out, and she has taken hers with her. Hers was green. So we had pink and blue and green, and they had some wallpaper in their room that had kind of a Victorian cottage, I don't know, it was had those colors in it. It was like a border. And so pulling from those colors in the border, we got a print. Let me see if I can find a piece that's still together. Okay. Again, these have been really well loved. So you see this cream color pattern right here. This was some yardage. It had some cute little boys and girls on it. They are so faded, it's probably really hard to see. But what I did is I used that print in all three of the quilts. And then all of the other colors, this one was Maggie's. Maggie's was all done in blues, and there were some blue colors in here. Again, they've all faded, but there was some blue in it, there was some green in it, and then there was some pink in it. So one girl got a blue one girl got a green one, and then one girl got the pink one. And used that same print, and this was the same in all of them. I do not remember the pattern. It was like a weave type of pattern, so that it looked like those, like the gingham was weaving in and out of the quilt. And I can remember, I was nursing a baby at the time, and I can remember sitting, this is how I did things back then. It's like I had all these kids. I was going to take them all with me when I went shopping, but it was like I would nurse the baby, we would jump in the car, we would drive, do the errand, get back in the car, and my goal was to get back home before that baby needed to be nursed again, because I didn't want to have all those kids in the car and have to sit and nurse the baby in the car. so I can remember that. I don't know why. I can remember getting some fabrics, knowing exactly what I was going for, and I nursed the baby, put them all in, we went right in, got what I needed, and back home. I did that a lot. So this was my early quilting, and you can again see how worn. These are well loved. These were on their beds for years. Actually, I went and grabbed these two off their beds. They still use these on their beds. And really worn, I mean, all the way through the back to the backing fabric. The backing, I think this was a sheet that I used on the back of this blue one. The pink one really, really is worn. You can see the backing fabric all the way through the front. But I know she loves this, and she still uses it. I'm not sure this one was a sheet. I think this was some yardage that I did. But back then, I didn't have a long arm, but my mom did. She was the first one to have a long arm. So I gave her these quilts, and she quilted them. And it was so interesting today when I pulled this off. I had not looked at this in a very long time, but looking at the pantograph on here, oh, I don't even know if you can see it, but I can see it really well. It's the Chantilly lace. I never realized that. I used Chantilly lace last week on a quilt, and looking back, that's what my mom had used on my daughter's quilt. So very worn, very faded, but I know they love these, and they cherish them. So this was my early work. I got to the point where I was piecing and then giving them to my mom to quilt. And this one, she did a meander on Maggie's quilt, and I don't know, the fabrics are pretty busy. I'm not even sure you can see them. So then after I created or made those three for those girls, then at some point, then it came to the point I said, okay, Mom, you're just gonna have to teach me to do the long arm, because I'm giving you too much to do. So she taught me how to do the long arm, and I'll show that quilt next week. That one is actually still on our bed. I only remember taking one quilt over to her house that I actually quilted, and she taught me how to do it. Again, I think I did just a loopy pattern, and I'll bring that one next week. Like I said, it's still on that's the quilt my husband and I use on our bed. So it's been there for many, many years. From that point, then I decided it was time to buy my own long arm. Originally was just going to do my own quilts, but it very quickly turned into quilting for others. And let me show you what I did next. So you can't have 3 girls in one bedroom with all quilts that match without having 3 boys in the other bedroom wanting quilts for their beds as well. So one of my next projects was creating quilts for my boys' beds. Again, they all matched. They had a room that was all done in tractors and John Deere. And a lot of this fabric was, this denim right here, this is actually from jeans. You can see it's all different colors. I saved scraps from jeans. I think this was some yardage I might have bought. This green I'm thinking was a sheet or something that I used. This is all early work. You can start with what you have. We were a young family. We had so many young children, and I just wanted to create. This was my outlet, and so I used what I had. And so it said it, so basically the block, and I probably used a pattern, I really don't even remember. The block is this piece right here. So I joined a green. This is like a green print that it looks like a field or some grass or something. And I had some of that and joined it with a denim piece. And the same thing here, but it's turned sideways. And then I had one block that was the tractor one. And then I did them with a darker green and with the denim and did those. So down the quilt, it's the stair step, and I may even still have this pattern now that I think about it. But all three boys matched. Then I did a yellow skinny border, a brown outer border, and then this one's Stevens, and he has just a pieced yellow border around the edge. Some of it was yellow John Deere fabric, some of it was just plain yellow fabric that was the same as this one. And before I get to another part of the front, then this, I know this was a sheet that I used for the backing. Obviously I had to piece it because it wasn't big enough. So I was just using what I had. To distinguish the boys' quilts, what I did was put their names in applique down the quilt. So in the John Deere blocks, this was Stevens, like I said. I used some lettering that I had, and this is just applique. I would use steam-a-seam. I still use steam-a-seam a lot with my applique if I'm not doing Lori Holt's way. And then I machine stitched it with a buttonhole stitch and did the letters all the way down, all in yellow. Looks like the P is gone and the H is gone. Again, I pulled this one off of his bed to bring to you today. So they've had these for a very long time. Daniel has his. He actually took his to college with him. And Joseph has his. He's taken his with him when he got married. So all three of them had quilts done this way. So the pantograph, this is not a pantograph. I did this hand-guided. I, at this point, had my own long arm. So I can't remember without seeing the other boys' if I did everything the same. But I just did some practice. So in all of the John Deere blocks, I just did a meander, just like a stipple meander. Then you can see in the denim blocks, I did kind of like I did in a square like this, and then I would travel over to the next one, and I would do a square, and then I would travel over to the next one. It looks like I tried to travel in a ditch, maybe I can look on the back and see better. So nothing perfect. I'm not using rulers. This is all just freehand. I just traced the square, and then I'd get into the middle of the square, and I'd come over to the next one, and then just trace the square and move in and out, and that's what I did. So meander in the John Deere blocks, and I would do squares in the denim blocks. I did the borders a little different too, so I got in the yellow part, I just did a meander, and then when I did the brown border, I just did boxes. This is all my early work. You know, I didn't give up because it wasn't perfect. This was, you just keep practicing. My kids didn't care. My kids did not care what the quilting looked like. They were just happy to have a quilt of their own. And don't give up. Don't give up. It's all part of your journey. You perfect it, you get better, and you get better. And this is what my early stuff looked like. And then I would see other people, I would see the quilts they were making, and I would say, oh, I want to do that, and I would work on that. And it may not be perfect, but we continue to learn, we continue to grow. If you're new to long arm quilting, keep at it. Try all the, practice, practice, practice. Eventually, if you can get to a digital machine, it's wonderful. I love it. Wouldn't trade it for the world now, but I had to start somewhere, and this is where I started. These were some of my early projects. So that's all I'll show you for this week. This is, you know, my very first quilt, and then quilts for my girls and quilts for my boys, and I'll share more with you next week. But that's my early journey, again, 20-some years ago, and I have loved the journey. I love creating quilts, but I love pulling out these old ones and just seeing them. They smell like my kids, and just seeing that they're well used. Obviously, I probably need to make them some new ones, but it just thrills my heart to see that they're still enjoying the ones that I did make for them. All right, let me clean these up, and then I want to show you something on the Longarm today. So I have a client quilt on the Longarm today, and I'll tell you more about this quilt next week, but I just wanted to show you a simple trick I use to help align pantographs. So I'm going to flip the camera around to show you a little closer view. So this is how I keep the edges of the quilt taut. These are just canvas leaders that I created myself, just with some yardage that I had. And then I pin this leader through the batting and the backing fabric as long as I have enough clearance for that. I always like to pin the batting as well so that they're both being pulled taut at the same tension. Then this has a little casing here where I put a dowel rod through, and then I attach these side leaders that come with the Handy Quilter machine to that dowel rod. That way there's even tension on all of that side, and not only pulling. If I would have just attached this clamp to the fabric itself, then it only pulls in that one area. By using a leader like this with a dowel rod, and there are other systems that you can use, this is just the way that I've done it. By using the dowel rod and clamping those to the dowel rod, then there's an even tension all across. Now someone has asked, so what do you do when you move the quilt, then when you rotate the quilt? So what I do is I unclamp the top one, then I will unpin all of these, but I will leave the last one. And the reason I do that is just so there's still some tension on this fabric, and then I will rotate the quilt up, and then I will, once I have the quilt rotated to the point that I want it, then I will undo this last part. So this will rotate with the quilt, you know, all except this will stay connected to the quilt as I rotate it. Then, so that would move up to about here. And then I undo those and then reconnect it to the side of the quilt. So that's what those things are. If you've seen those in other videos and wondered how I was using those, you can create these yourself. By using the canvas, it doesn't stretch. It's a little thicker than just your cotton fabrics. That way it doesn't stretch. It is double folded, you can see here, and then stitched along this edge, and then done another stitch here so that it creates that casing. All right, so I have reconnected that, and what I wanted to show you today is I have advanced this quilt up to, you can see where I finished that line, and with a Handy Quilter, how I advance it is I use drag and drop, whatever system you have, and how you rotate a quilt and get it to the point that you want. So when I bring this back up, well, with drag and drop, what you do is you find a point, like I would choose, I usually always choose an intersection. So if I would choose this intersection right there, I would put my needle right there on top of that intersection. Then I come up to the screen and I tap drag. Now, as I rotate the quilt, it keeps that position right there. The needle, the computer thinks that my needle is right there. So as I rotate the quilt then, because that point would have been down here, I would have finished the last pass, that point intersection would have been down here. I would have marked that, you know, put my needle over it. My needle is not down into the fabric, it's just over the top of that intersection. Then I hit drag on my screen, and then as I rotate the quilt, then that intersection is now up here. So when I realign my, then I take it right back to that point. Then I do the drop feature, And now my computer is at the same spot my needle is, and now it's moving as my screen is moving as I move this. So once you get to that point, how I align a pantograph. So this pantograph is not a super, not one that is a precise lineup. This is the ginger snap, but you don't want the next row to overlap that at all. So it does need to make sure that you have some alignment there. And it's, I may turn off my, let me see if I turn off my lights, if that helps any. All right, you might be able to see a little bit better without that bright light on here. So then how I align a pantograph is I know, before I move, I know that I am spot on right there at that intersection. Where my needle is and where my computer is the same thing. So I will come down here to the end. Now I would hope that when I line up at another intersection that is going to be the same on my screen, but it's not always. And especially the farther you get out from the middle of the quilt. So I will come up here to my screen, and let me increase this so you can see what I'm doing. That orange line is, the orange intersection is my crosshairs. So that's where I'm at, both left and right. So I will line up this. This is the row that I was just on. I will line up my crosshairs right there at that intersection, right here. Then I will hit my horizontal lock there. So I know as I go along that, pull my machine horizontally, that on my screen anyway, every time I come to that intersection, it's going to be spot on. Now what I do then is I come down here to my quilt, and I can see, and again it's going to be a little difficult with that glide foot, but you can do this on your own machine. I want to make sure that every time my computer says I'm at that intersection, that's exactly where my needle is as well. So I pull it across, and my computer says that I'm at an intersection, and I look right here to see if I'm at an intersection. And again, it's going to be a little difficult to see. But what I wanted to show you is if you are here, and this rotation, it's all matching up, and of course it would because I'm on camera. You know, hardly ever does it always match up all the way along. But if I get, you know, if I line it up horizontally to right here, and on my fabric, the point is actually down a little bit, this is where I take a scrap of batting here, and this is just cut off of the end of a quilt. I save these, and then I use these to tuck in behind. So if I need to move this quilt, so if my material, my needle, where my needle is, my computer is saying your intersection should be right there, and if my fabric is not actually there, then when I tuck this batting in behind this bar right here, it pulls that material up so that I can line up. Now at my point, I've pulled it too far, so it's not going to line up because it was perfect at first. But do you see now where here is the intersection and my needle is down below it? So I do not need any extra batting in this one this time because it lines up perfectly. My light is right over that intersection. But if I am doing this and I find, oh, when I line that up, my computer says I should be on that intersection and mine is down a couple of millimeters, or you know, even a centimeter or so, then that's where you take this batting and you tuck it in behind this bar. By doing that, it creates a little more, it's just adding more material in there, more batting in there, so that it pulls that quilt up there. I've seen this question come, where are you using batting at? You know, I don't understand. Are you putting it in between the quilt? Where does it go? And that's all you're doing, is you're tucking it in behind here. When I finish this next row, and I will, before I go into that, I will do that all the way along. I will pull it all the way along. My horizontal lock is on, so that I just have to pull this to the right, and every time I stop at that intersection and I match it up. Is it matched up down here? and then I pull it along to that next intersection. And notice with this pantograph, I'm aligning it to this loop. This loop is a little farther down. I am not looking at that one. I am looking at every time on the pattern where I hit this loop that's on the left part, left right there, right here. That's the intersection I'm looking at. This one does not line up. So every time I hit that intersection on the pattern, right there again, and then I look down. Is my needle right over the intersection? If it is not, then that's where I'm tucking in batting behind this bar to align that intersection up, so that then when I do my next pass, I know that my computer and my needle are in the same place. So there are some quilts that I will have batting tucked all the way behind there just to make sure that my pantograph lines up all the way along. Sometimes it's only at one end, and then I don't need it at the other end. It just depends on it depends on fabric, it depends on how pieced it is, you know, is there stay stitching? There are so many factors, but that's an easy way to align a pantograph before you move it to the next row. I hope that helps. All right, I hope that was a help to you, and now we'll go on to the star of the show, which is the customer quilts. So I have these all laid out here today, and we will just go over each one. So here are pictures of the first one. All right, this is Cammy's first quilt. She created this with a Creative Grids ruler. She said there's no pattern per se. You're using the ruler that has this Dresden plate. It also comes with the circular piece too, so that you can create that. Isn't that so pretty? She's done 5 of them on this quilt. She has appliqued them, so the whole Dresden plate is pieced together, and then she has appliqued that down onto the fabric itself, and then you can see she just did a little stitch right along the edge there to keep it down. Very pretty. Love the fabrics on this. So this is called Beloved, and this is a fabric line that was curated by Victoria Newmeyer, and I have linked that down below. Love, love, love the color shades on this one. So pretty. The backing fabric is not from that line, but this is an art gallery fabric created for art gallery fabrics. This is a Bonnie Christine. Love Bonnie Christine. She is one of my mentors. I follow her a lot. So Bonnie Christine pattern on the back. Aren't those so pretty? So created with a Creative Grids ruler, and I've linked that down below too if you want to try that. Very pretty. So the pantograph we did, this one is called a beaded orange peel. So your normal orange peel pattern, but then it has this little circle on the top and the bottom. I like that. Cammy actually found this one and suggested it, and I did not have this one, and so I put it into my arsenal here in my studio, and that is one I'll probably be using a lot. I really like that. So we used a cream color fabric, blends well with the muted colors of the pinks and the browns. Really like that. Very pretty. This measures 40 by 40, so this will be a nice wall hanging. Like I said, there were 5 of those Dresden plates, just centered. She did a really nice job. Very pretty. All right, let's move on to Cammy's second quilt. Cammy's second quilt, she said this is the Hideaway pattern. This is actually a free pattern on the Fat Quarter shop. She said she purchased as a kit, so all of the fabrics that were needed came along with it. The fabrics in this are called Capsule's Nest, and this is also by Art Gallery Studios for Art Gallery Fabrics. Pattern is very simple. You know, you've got this one looks like a 10-inch, probably from a layer cake. And then you have some piece blocks as well. You alternate between an X and a plus on that side. So very easy piecing. And then for the larger blocks, then you have some that are fussy cut, so from a panel or something like that. So you could pick up this pattern and use your own panel, put some other fabrics with it, and it would be a really cute. So each of the blocks has some white sashing, no cornerstones needed. For this one, the sashing is done the short part in between the blocks, and then the long part is the horizontal one. So we talked about that last week. You can do your sashing either way, either the short parts in the top and bottom, and then your vertical ones are your long pieces, or like Cammy has done it, the short ones in between the blocks, and then your long pieces are your horizontal ones. And then she's done another border around the edge, all white fabrics, very pretty. The backing fabric is really cute. I'm assuming this is part of that same line. I don't have information on it, but look at those paw prints. Just adorable. Really cute. You can see the pantograph. So Cammy chose Mr. Marbles. This is a pantograph designed by Jess Ziegler of the Longarm League. I love this pantograph on juvenile baby quilts. I think it's very playful, adds a lot of texture, but again, not necessarily repeating a design, not putting a character or an animal or anything, but just lots of texture, but a very playful. So Mr. Marbles, you kind of have this circle, but then you have just these little squiggles. It matches up really easy, although it looks really tight and like you would have some precise points. It really nests well together, where the curves from one, you know, and the curves from the next row down come in pretty easy. It matches up pretty well, really well. I mean, there's no precise points that have to match. So as long as you have your alignment correct, like we talked about earlier, then the next row will nest right up inside there. The thread for this one is a white thread, again, because we have all that white backing, background, fabric, everything is set on a white background, so the white was the best choice. It creates all of that texture without being noticeable in a color itself. Very pretty. This quilt measures 58 by 58. Perfect for a baby to go in a baby's room, flung over the side of the crib, down on the floor. This would even make a great wall hanging for a baby's room. Very pretty. Love it, love it. All right, we'll move on to Cammy's third quilt. The third one that Cammy sent to me, she said, is actually pieced by her mom, and her mom unfortunately has some health issues and is no longer able to do piecing or quilting, and so Cammy is finishing up quilts for her mom. So she doesn't know a pattern for this, although this looks like some foundation paper that I know Fat Quarter Shop has, and if I can find it, I'll link to it. It kind of looks like some of foundation paper I've seen, but this was not done with foundation paper. From what I could tell from the back of it, there was no remnants of that at all. But the block is, so you can see the block, there's the bottom of it and there's the side of it. So you have these diagonal pieces. They're not really, they're done on a diagonal so that it comes in and very skinny at the top and wider, and then the opposite on the other one. And when you put a block next to it, so they're all pieced the same way, but when you rotate that block next to it in these four that intersect, then you get that star type of print there. A really neat alternate pattern that occurs. The fabric line is called Modern Roses, and we could tell that because the backing fabric matched some prints on the front, and it still had the selvage on it. So that's how we were able to tell that this was called Modern Roses. It almost feels, at least the back, a little bit of a linen type feel to it, and some of the others, they may be cotton, but they just have a tad different feel to them compared to the one I just showed you, which was an art gallery. Art gallery fabrics have a very sheen feel, a very silky feel to them, and this one does not have that. So you can kind of tell sometimes the design, not necessarily the designer, but the manufacturer, by the type of material it is. Both wonderful. I think they all have a place, but just a different feel. This is a little more, not glossy bright, a little more muted, and just really like it. Like the colors in this one too. And this one measures 51 by 51, so again, a good baby size quilt. I'm assuming it started with probably a layer cake type of block there. For the Pantograph, this one is called Geoflower. I like the modern feel that this one has. It has that floral theme like the fabrics do, but just a modern look to it. This one, again, nests in very well. You can see this row, how it comes up to here. You could bring these up tighter and make them actually touch. I don't think it's necessary to get the design element to make them touch. If you do bring this one up tighter to make it touch, then that would make these touch. There's just a lot of points that would need to line up, and I think it looks really well. Or it looks like a really nice pattern even without making those touch. Like the elongated flower, the 4 petals. This one, you know, it alternates rows. So this one and this one stitch out in the same row, and then the next row you're stitching the ones that come in between there. So it does have to be offset by a half so that you create that. We used a cream color thread on this one. Cream color blends in better with the colors. A white would have been very much more noticeable, where the cream again creates your texture without having a noticeable color on top. And not that that's bad. You might choose an aqua color, or you might choose a peachier color for your thread, and there's nothing wrong with that too. If you're a person that likes color, then try those things and see how you like that. That just adds another dimension to it. Love this. Love the fabrics. Those bright yellow pieces. Very pretty. All right, I have one more of Cammy's. This is the Labyrinth Walk quilt. This is a pattern done by Florence, and oh my goodness, these are one of those, this pattern just intrigues me. When it is, again, when it's on the long arm, I don't see the whole design. I'm just quilting. It is not until you lay this one out that you see the depth that's created by the placement of the fabrics on this one. Just incredible, just incredible. And I don't think it does justice on a couch. I think this one is one you almost need to have laid out on a bed or hung up on the wall to see the depth and the thought and the color placement and how it creates the depth of that maze to me. And I'm just in awe. This is the second one that I've quilted like this one. The other one was done in browns, I believe, and this one the blues and black. Just incredible. So really easy piecing. You've got some half square triangles, you've got some easy corner triangles, but the placement is what creates that depth to it. And then you've got the very skinny white. I mean, that finishes off as 1 inch, so it's pretty small, but that creates the top of the whole maze, the labyrinth. So Cammy said this again was one that was pieced by her mom for her brother. All it needed was one last border, so Cammy added that and then sent it to me to be quilted. And that's such a neat gesture of love for Cammy to be finishing those for her mom. So she did ask that I pick out a background fabric for this one. So this is a 108 Essentials. This is called Trellis. So it's got the lattice type of work set on point, and it's faded in some spots. That's intentional. That's the way the fabric is done. So just a nice black to coordinate with the black. I don't have specifics on, sorry for that sun coming in over there. I don't have specifics on pattern or on fabrics. She didn't know those. A lot of them are just a little mottled color. They're not solids, but you could very definitely use Moda solid, Bella solids, any solid prints. But these are a little more, almost like a grungy type. You could use those as well. You can see the black along the edge. You can see the mottled print in that one a little bit better than you can in the lighter colors, but even those are some mottled, not true solids. The white is a true solid. Very pretty. So for the Pantograph, this one is called Merge. Let me do it on some lighter. This is called Merge. This is very straight line with just a little bit of diagonal. Again, it nests really well together. I can't even show you. Oh, I could try to find it. So the line actually is here, and then it drops down here. It nests in very well together. So a diagonal here is matching up with a diagonal on the row above it. Does not touch at all. You want to create, when I'm closing up patterns, the spacing on a pattern, I like to create the spacing between the rows to be very similar to the spacing in the row, if that makes sense. So this one is only, like a finger width here. So when I am matching up the Pantograph to match up to the line above it, that's about all the width that I want in between that one. So whether you have a flower that's this big or a flower that's this big, how those flowers are oriented to each other in one line that stitches out. So if you've got a flower here and a flower here that are stitching, that would be pretty odd for a Pantograph to be that far apart. But if so, then I want the next row below it not to be right up there next to it. I want similar spacing in that row. If I've got flowers that are like this, then that next row down, I want those flowers to be very similar in their spacing as it is in the row, so that it looks like it's an overall pattern and it doesn't look like I've separated them into rows. I don't want to be able to tell where the row is. I want it together enough so that it looks like it's one cohesive design. So when you're pulling in a pattern like this, I try to create the next row that's coming in for the spacing between that row to be very similar to the way the spacing is in the row that was just stitched out. So you're spacing this way, very similar to your spacing this way. So this one is done with a light gray thread. So again, gray blends really well with blues and blacks. So on the black print, and then because this is a black print, you see the gray, but I like gray. I think white's too bright on these blues and blacks. But a gray works really well. Very pretty. Just the depth of this just intrigues me. Like I said, I think this is so cool. All right, let's move on to another one. I have two quilts by Joy today, and Joy said this quilt was inspired by Corona, which is a laundry basket quilts pattern. She decided she didn't want to do all the applique. If you look at the original pattern, there's a ring of applique that Adita puts around the center star, and there's some applique that goes around the outer edge of the star. On the pattern that Adita wrote, it shows more of a floral border. And Joy chose this dark blue, which I think is just stunning as a as a frame for the quilt. So the fabrics are all done with a Moda scrap bag. These are Minnick and Simpson patterns, or Minnick and Simpson fabrics from both their Newport and their Belle Isle lines. So she's using scraps from a Moda scrap bag for all of that. Really neat. So all done in half square triangles, all of it. She said she used the strip tube ruler for all of the half square triangles. So it says you can use, and Moda scrap bags are usually done in 2.5 inches, if I believe, and so the ruler that she used for this works really well for 2.5 inch strips. You'll have to check out that ruler to make your half square triangles if you'd like to do it that way. And then, so each of the blocks, so here is a block right there, this part. So you've got a block made with half square triangles, and then you are joining that block of half square triangles with a block with yardage that is just a solid, and you're doing a large half square triangle. The whole quilt is made that way. So here's one, you know, with this side of it being the half square triangles, and then here's one with this side of it being half square triangles. Then you have another block here, this side of it being the half square triangles. And so this is not one solid piece of cream, that is an intersection of 4 blocks right there. So, and then you've got the inner star. Love it, so pretty. So pretty. So each one of those half square triangles ends up being a 2.5 inch square, or maybe 2 inch, you know, if you're starting with 2.5, maybe 2 inch square. And then the dark blue border. The backing fabric for this is again one of those Essentials 108 inch wide back that is again the Trellis. So the exact same print that was on the back of the Labyrinth, but that was done in black. This is done in the cream, but it's the same lattice, so it's hard to tell on the lattice, but it does. This is Trellis, and so it's hard to see the lattice work on this, but it's just like the black one. So with more of a cream color with the lattice done in white. So that shows off the Pantograph really well. Joy chose the lemon peel Pantograph. Love this. I think I say that every time I show you lemon peel. I think this is just classy. It added a lot of softness to it. It's the 3 petals that overlap, and then it goes right into the next 3. This nest and welt is actually, would go like this. So this can show you a little bit better. So this is a row here, and then the next one, you know, comes up and nest inside it just a little bit. And again, you can see kind of the spacing between the different lemon peels here, and then I've brought up the second row close enough that it's very similar in spacing. I don't want to have this row down here so that I have all of this empty space. I want to bring the next row in very similar in spacing as to how that is done in the row. And that's not done, that is all done as pre-work before I ever start stitching. So when I'm bringing in the design on mine, it's Pro Stitcher. When I'm bringing it up on the computer, it has one whole line is what it is. And so then I am repeating that line, and then I'm closing up the gaps to bring those in. So when I have it on my screen, it has the whole quilt, and all of the spacing is done. So I'm not doing this spacing as I'm quilting out. It's all done on the computer work prior to. And then I save my workspace as I'm working on it, because glitches happen. I've had it where, you know, all of a sudden the Pro Stitcher says, I'm done for the minute, you know, and it closes the program. And if I had not saved my workspace on there, then I would have to recreate that whole thing. When a glitch like that happens and the computer shuts down for just a second, and then I bring that workspace back up, I line my needle back up, I use the drag and drop a lot, even to reline my patterns. So if I stop at night maybe and come back the next morning and I'm lining up a pattern again, I will go to my screen first, and I will usually on the edge, not in the middle of the quilt, because it's a little harder to know which part I'm at in the middle. So I'll go to the edge, maybe on a start of a row, and I will push my drag and drop there, and then I will move my machine to that spot and right over that intersection. And so then when I let go of the drag and drop, my needle and my and my machine are in the same spot. So I always go take my computer there first, which means I have to move the machine because the computer thinks it knows where it's at, you know. So, but it may not match up on the quilt at first, and that's okay. So I go to my screen to move my machine so that I get to usually a starting point on the screen, drag and drop, then I move my machine to that point on the quilt, and then undo the drag and drop, and then my needle and my design are in the same spot. So that's how I realign. But I always save my workspace underneath a customer file on there so that if something happens, I can go back. And I've got the exact sizing. I don't have to recreate any of that. And that's all done prior to the quilting. So the thread on this one is a cream color thread. That's what matches the backing fabric. This cream on this side is a Isabella Solid. This is snow, so it's a creamier color. It's not a true white. And that cream color fabric or cream color thread blends perfectly. You can see the cream color on the blue. I just think it adds another dimension to that blue. Just very pretty. Very pretty. Love it, love it, love it. This one measures 72 by 72. Nice size quilt. All right, let's move on to this poppy quilt. This quilt kind of warmed up to my heart. When I first saw it, it's like, oh, it's okay. But the more I worked with it, the more I really enjoyed it. So this is called Poppy. This is a pattern you can find on Etsy at Easy PC Quilts. All right. So 2 blocks. You have your red poppy block, and then you have this other, I don't know what the name of this block is. It almost looks like a jack. You ever play jacks as a kid? That's what it reminds me of. So you have your corner squares, your middle square, and then just the tiniest little easy corner triangles on this rectangle. Just the tiniest little ones, so that it creates that little bit of leg on those. This blue fabric is actually a Lori Holt B plaid. It's the Denim Hugs one. And I think it has a very vintage feel in here. I did not realize that that was a Lori Holt fabric in this quilt. I love how she's used that. The reds and the whites were from her stash. She's got black centers for all of the poppies. So pretty. And the white, I think, was, if I didn't say that, was from her stash as well. This quilt measures 63 by 63. On the back, she used this blue dot, and she says this is from Carolina Favorites. It's a tiny dot navy. I was not able to find that exact one, but I did link down below a very similar blue background with the white polka dots on the top. So classy. And I think what really drew me to this quilt is, as I was quilting it, I chose, or she asked for the Becker's crop circles, and I've used this pattern a lot. You know, it's like, yeah, it's an okay, but I shrunk this one down so that it really was noticeable on the red, and the more I stitched it out, the more I loved it. This is a Pantograph that larger, it's okay, and I use it. Sometimes this is a great one to use on more of an older quilt that you're wanting a little an older feel. You don't want more of a modern design. If you increase this one, it's, you know, so it's much larger, the same design but just much larger. It kind of gives the feel of more of a reproduction type Civil War time period or something like that. It's a great one for those. But for this one, we shrunk it down, and I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I love all the texture it adds to those red poppies. Every time I stitched it out, every time I came back to it, like, oh, I just love this even more. Love it. And so this is a white thread, and so yes, the white shows up really well on the red, but all the background pieces, these rectangles, were all white. I didn't want to use any colored a cream, it would have made it look dirty. When you've got white, bright white thread or fabrics like this, I think it's best just to use white. I think it just makes the fabric look dirty if you use a cream color or an off-white. Just loved it. And on the backing, you know, is so busy with those dots that the texture just blends right in. Oh, I just thought this was adorable. And again, that Lori Holt fabric just looks very vintage in this quilt. Love this. All right, I have some by Ellen today. I have 3 quilts by Ellen today to finish out our time together. This is a Cora Yoder. This is Oh Happy Day sampler. So if you have that book, Oh Happy Day, this is using all of the blocks from that. So each block is different. Love it. Got the stars. I love these little houses. They almost look like little mushrooms, but the little houses. Then there's another star on this corner. Love the donut type blocks there. The center, there's your center one. And so last week we had Lisa's quilt that was all the checkerboard. So there's the block that's where Lisa had done a whole quilt just with this block, remember, in all the different colors. So here, this is a sampler, so we're using one block. Again, see how the yellow creates the X, and then you've got the green as your other ones. So the fabrics in this are all buttercup and slate. Again, Cora Yoder fabrics. I just love the grays in this. I love the sashing in this as well. So the sashing is all of these little tiny squares. They're probably started out 2.5, they may be 2 inches now. And then all the cornerstones are these stars. I love this, love it. And it's a little like honeycomb type fabric there, is that darker gray. Love the stars as the cornerstones. Setting off all of those blocks. Very pretty sampler. Here's your half square. This is the same block that was just in that Adidas sitar, just a little bit bigger, where you're creating half square triangles and then joining that with a large half square triangle. And there you can really see the stars. The border, love the darker border. It just puts a frame around the whole thing. Again, all Cora Yoder fabrics, all from the buttercup and slate line. So pretty. The backing is also from that same line. Very pretty. The pantograph on this one, this is the Ginger Snap Pantograph. This is the same one that I was using on that client quilt that we were talking about on the Longarm earlier. This is, again, white thread. Because the background is all white, I don't want it to look dirty by using a cream color or something else, so all the white thread. Very pretty. The final measurements on this one are 62 by 62. Love it, Ellen. All right, let's move on to this one. Right, if you're hearing some little voices in the background, we've got a couple young boys here with us today, just helping out a family in church who has some family members in the hospital, and so we volunteered to watch their boys today. I was trying to get my filming in while they were gone visiting my son who has some chicks, and so they went on a little field trip, and I talked too long and didn't get my filming done before they're back. So if you're hearing little voices, that's what that's from. But I just have 2 more quilts today, and then we'll be all finished. So this one is another one of Ellen's, and this pattern is a GE Designs pattern. This is called Hope, and love the brightness of this. So here's the block. The block has the sashing across in the diagonal. So here, let me hold this up this way. All right, so here's your block. Looks like it's done in strips with the dark strip in the middle. I don't have the pattern. I don't know exactly how it's put together. You know, this almost looks like the strip quilts that we've seen before. This one did not have any paper on the back, so not any foundation or anything. So you'll have to get the pattern to create this, but it's just so pretty. And then I love when you join them together, how you get those. It looks like it's set on point. It's not set on point, so it's a very easy design to do. But you get those long pieces of lattice. The dark is very pretty with all of those bright colors in between. Apologize for the bright light behind me as well. It was an overcast day when I started. So just love all that. I don't know the fabrics on these. Bright blues, bright greens, bright oranges, bright reds, and I just think this is so cool. So cool. The backing, she chose a minky in this like a turquoise blue color. Very pretty. Very pretty. So in picking out pantographs, I suggested several to Ellen, and then she finally just said, I want you to pick. I don't know, I'm uncertain what one to go with. And for this one, I felt like we needed something just a little, do I say wonky? It just felt like this quilt, because there's so much stuff here, bright colors, there's, you know, triangles, but they're misshapen, you know, just a little odd shaped. Everything's just a little bit wonky in a way, and not in a bad wonky. I mean, it's like just really cool and very bright. And so I just felt we needed something that with the brightness of the quilt, the busyness of the pattern, the busyness of the fabrics, I didn't want to do necessarily straight lines or anything. And so the more I handled the quilt, and I had one design picked out when I was starting to load it, and the more that I was working with it as I'm loading it on the machine, I changed my mind. And I went with malachite. Now malachite I use a lot on water-themed quilts, you know, juvenile quilts that have pirate theme or water or dolphins or any fish, anything like that. I use it a lot because I think it has that feel to it. And for some reason, it just felt the right one to use on this. It's a little, you know, it's not circles, so I felt like it matched just the feel of this quilt. The quilt it's not circles, it's not modern, it's not necessarily geometric, although it has geometric shapes in it, but it's not straight lines, although it has straight lines in it, you know, it's not honeycomb or hexagons, even though it has hexagons on it. There's just a lot going on here, and I felt like the malachite was a good one because it created some movement in it. It created, not that it needed movement, but it emphasized the movement, kept it a little wonky without just being super spiral or super straight. And I really like it. I think it turned out really well. And then on that minky, I think the malachite kind of looks like water. Not that we're making it look like water, but I just really like it. I think it turned out really well. I used a medium gray on this one. These fabrics are, the tone of them is a little darker, so the medium gray, a light gray was too bright. We wanted to keep kind of the, even though the colors are bright, the hue is dimmed. I'm not a design person, so you can disagree with me if you want, but even though they're bright, I feel like a lighter thread is too bright on them. I wanted to keep it a little darker. So this is a medium gray, and again on minky you don't even see the thread color, blends right in there. So Hope by GE Designs. This quilt measures 57 by 67. Really neat. Love the diagonal effect you get when you see it laid out, how the colors move across the quilt. Very pretty. All right, I have one more by Ellen. Ellen's last quilt was the Bountiful charity quilt-along that Fat Quarter Shop did. Each year, Fat Quarter Shop does a quilt-along that raises money for Make-A-Wish. And so down below, I have given you the link for the pattern. It's a free pattern. There are several different releases, so you'll want to get each one, but they ask that you make a $20 donation at least to Make-A-Wish Foundation because you're receiving the pattern for free, and then that supports Make-A-Wish. And then Fat Quarter Shop also matches the donations that people give. So there is also, in addition to the quilt pattern, there's also a cross stitch pattern. So if you'd like to make the same thing in cross stitch and make them companion pieces, it would be really pretty. So a sampler, so there are flower blocks, there are butterflies, there are tulips, and there are baskets. So pretty. Love this. You hear the boys in the background. So this fabric is all sun washed by Yoder, and then the white is also from that line, I do believe. It's not a solid white, it's a white with some print to it. I believe it's part of that line as well. So you have the peach basket at the top, and then there is a blue basket on the other corner. Love the gingham handle, love the star on the front of the basket. And then you have the cross section in the middle with the flowers going in all four directions. Very, very pretty. Love it. So Ellen did a pieced backing as well. So she used the sun washed, the large floral print, and then she created butterflies and flowers going down the middle of the quilt. Very pretty. Put it right down the middle. Ellen a lot of times also adds a label on her quilt backings as well, and that's really pretty. So a pieced backing, the large floral on either side, and then the pieced butterflies and flowers down through the middle. Very, very cute. For the pantograph. This pantograph is called Paper Blooms. We saw this last week on that flower pot quilt. And again, just love this pantograph. Adds tons of texture, repeats the floral feel of the quilt without being, it's a little more modern feel, which I think this sampler kind of feels that way too. So not just swirls and flowers, but some straighter lines. This is done in rows. It does come in where, I think I mentioned this last week too, when you pull it into your design and repeat the rows, it's going to line all of this type of flower on top of each other. So you have to offset the row by half so that you alternate between the circle and then the flower in the row, not in the row, but in the next row, so that you want the flower underneath the circle and alternate it that way. Very pretty. Again, a white thread. The background fabrics are all white, so we use the white thread again on this one. Very pretty. Love it, love it. All right, that's all the customer quilts that I have for this week. Next week I'll be sharing with you more details on this one and the other customer finishes that I do. So if you are in need of long arm quilting services, I hope you'll find my information down below. I also wanted to mention that if you enjoy my YouTube videos, then you will also enjoy receiving my weekly newsletter. Each week on the weekend, usually Saturday morning, I send out a newsletter, and it gives all a recap of everything that I've talked about in my YouTube videos, so it gives all the information about the patterns and the fabrics. You get to see close-up pictures of the quilting, and it's just a great recap that you can read through. I always share information about my family and what's going on around here as well. So I hope you'll sign up for my email list. That is down below. If you are in need of long-arm quilting services, that information is down there as well. And I hope you'll meet me back here next week, because every quilt is worth finishing. We'll see you then.